When Taehyung looks at him like that, Jungkook lowers his eyes as if he already knows he can't escape. In every introduction, or moment shared between Taehyung and Jungkook, there's a repeating pattern. The glances they exchange aren't empty or unintentional stares. When Taehyung fixes his attention on Jungkook, he does so directly, without distractions. His eyes don't wander, they don't blink nervously, they stay there, holding an invisible connection that only the two of them understand. There's no fake laughter or need to cover it up with exaggerated gestures. There's just him, watching Jungkook as if he's the only thing that matters in that moment. Jungkook, for his part, has responses that don't need words. When he senses Taehyung looking at him, his expression changes. Sometimes he lowers his gaze, sometimes he smiles to himself, and other times, he stays still, as if the moment is too powerful to face all at once. They don't act, nor do they follow a script. What you see in their eyes can't be rehearsed, and what you feel in the way they lose themselves in each other can't be faked either. Taehyung doesn't just observe from afar. He often does it in plain sight, as if he doesn't care if others notice. He looks at him with tenderness, but also with a touch of pride, as if he knows Jungkook is his. That confidence in his gaze shows that there's no fear in what he feels. On the other hand, Jungkook, although more shy at times, lets out small smiles, natural reactions that don't come from a presentation script, but from contact with someone important. When Jungkook touched Jimin's chin, no words were needed. Taehyung was already looking at him as if something inside him had just snapped. During a common moment during a recording, Jungkook was playing with Jimin right next to Taehyung. Between laughter and jokes, Jungkook reached out and touched Jimin's chin. It was a small gesture, something that might go unnoticed by many, but not Taehyung. His reaction was immediate. The movement of his eyes, the way he pressed his lips together, and the silence he maintained showed that what had just happened affected him more than he wanted to show. Taehyung doesn't need to speak to express what he feels. His body language was clear. He wasn't pleased that Jungkook was sharing those kinds of gestures with someone else. Not out of insecurity, but because those kinds of touches have always been part of his language with Jungkook. The fact that he shares them with someone else, even as a simple joke, changes something in Taehyung. That look he gave Jungkook wasn't a coincidence. It was a silent response, a warning that he noticed what happened and didn't like it at all. Jungkook understood what was happening without anyone explaining it to him. As soon as Taehyung looked at him like that, he lowered his gaze, as if acknowledging what he had done without direct confrontation. That reaction shows that Jungkook knows exactly how much Taehyung means to him. It also makes it clear that he is well aware of the emotional boundaries that exist between them. Jungkook didn't mean to hurt, but he understood that this small gesture with Jimin carried an emotional weight for Taehyung that he couldn't ignore. Taehyung and Jungkook don't try to change each other, they just accept each other, balance each other, and choose each other, even when they're apart. Jungkook and Taehyung have different personalities, as is evident to anyone who has seen them spend time together. One can be quieter, the other more extroverted. One focuses on certain details, while the other is carried away by more emotional moments. But instead of generating conflict, these differences have created a strong bond. They don't seek to be similar, they don't imitate each other. They accept each other as they are, and in doing so, they build something solid. Each of them has different tastes, whether in music, clothing, hobbies, or ways of speaking. However, neither tries to change the other. There's no sign of pressure for one to adapt. On the contrary, what they do is contribute. If one likes something different, the other doesn't make fun of it or avoid it, they simply respect it. That kind of respect isn't common, especially in relationships where there's constant exposure like theirs. The way they manage to coexist without clashing shows they know each other deeply. They don't try to force a perfect relationship. Their way of relating shows they've found a way to support each other and be present, while still being themselves. Accepting each other isn't simply saying, "I love you as you are," it's acting consistently every day. And that's what they demonstrate every time they appear together. There's a clarity in their dynamic. Neither feels less or more than the other. There's no competition or need for prominence. When Jungkook shines, Taehyung watches with pride. When Taehyung has a special moment, Jungkook calmly supports him. This kind of behavior can only be sustained when there's a real bond, built on understanding, not on appearances. For years, the public's reactions to the closeness between Taehyung and Jungkook have been intense, and often contradictory. There's a portion of the fandom that tries to downplay their relationship, using terms like fan service or companionship. However, that insistence only proves one thing: they're seeing something they can't ignore. If nothing really existed, there wouldn't be so much need to talk about what they do or don't do. Every gesture between Taehyung and Jungkook is analyzed by many eyes. But the most curious thing is that even with so much attention on them, they haven't stopped behaving the same way. They haven't avoided lingering glances. They haven't stopped the shared silences or the moments when they seek each other out for no clear reason. This isn't something that can be sustained for years just to fuel a public image. The truth is that what exists between them continues to surface at the most unexpected moments, and that's not a strategic response. It's a natural reaction between two people who share something real. The criticism they receive often comes from people trying to protect other dynamics. Some Jungkookers, for example, question what exists between Taehyung and Jungkook. They claim that everything they do is part of the job or that we exaggerate what we see. But if everything were that simple, the details wouldn't be explained. There would be no justification for the awkward silences, the blushes that arise out of nowhere, or the body language that completely changes when they're around each other. What's really happening is that many don't know how to process a relationship that doesn't align with their preconceived notions. But Taehyung and Jungkook have never asked permission to exist as they are. They don't change the way they interact just because people are watching them. And that says more than any public statement. They don't need to say anything, because they've already said everything with their way of being together. The public's constant interest in their relationship is further confirmation. Even those who criticize them are watching them all the time. They are hanging on their every move, every glance, every word or gesture. They don't just look for evidence to deny what exists, they also look for arguments that allow them to maintain an image that no longer holds up. Regardless of what others may say, the relationship between Taehyung and Jungkook has remained strong over time. It doesn't matter if there are rumors, criticism, or people trying to cast doubt on what is seen. They continue to act in a way that makes it clear that nothing needs explaining. The moments they share, the glances they give each other, and the reactions they have toward each other are proof enough to understand what lies between them. When Jungkook made that gesture to Jimin, it wasn't a malicious act. But it wasn't a gesture without impact either. The important thing isn't what happened, but how they reacted afterward. Taehyung didn't let it pass as something irrelevant. And Jungkook, noticing, didn't ignore it either. They both responded with natural behaviors, without needing to speak. This is how their relationship works. They understand each other without words, they care for each other without asking, and they adjust without conflict. This way of bonding is what has created a barrier between them and any outside noise. They don't need to declare anything. They don't have to clarify everything they do. Their actions speak for themselves. Even when there's criticism or speculation, they don't change the way they interact. They remain consistent, maintaining gestures and ways of looking at each other that aren't repeated with anyone else. That's what keeps Taehyung and Jungkook attentive to every detail. Taehyung's jealousy at that moment wasn't exaggerated. It was a sign that he values every gesture he shares with Jungkook. He doesn't want to see them repeated with other people. It's not about control, but rather respect for what they've built together. Jungkook, upon recognizing this, doesn't defend himself or justify himself. He just changes his attitude, and that speaks volumes. It means he's willing to protect what they have. That he understands its value. Over time, there have been many people who try to discredit what happens between them. Some Jungkookers, for example, often use these types of scenes to reinforce different theories. But the truth is, if Taehyung and Jungkook didn't feel anything, there wouldn't be any need for these kinds of reactions. There wouldn't be such meaningful glances. And above all, there wouldn't be such silent yet obvious jealousy. This is what has made their connection stand out so much among those who follow them. What they experience doesn't seem temporary. It's not something that depends on trends or the moment. It's sustained by a firm foundation, acceptance, balance, and connection. There's no need to pretend anything. What they show, even through small gestures, carries weight. The way they walk together, look at each other, and understand each other without words confirms that there is a strong emotional connection between the two. Although their differences could have pushed them apart, in their case they did the opposite. They used those differences to get closer, to understand each other, to support each other. What they have achieved is not something that can be faked. It is the building of a bond where the most important thing is not to change the other, but to fully value them. This is one of the reasons why Taehyung remains so evident over time. Now that the two are serving their military service, there is a physical space that separates them. They don't share schedules, they don't upload content together, and they aren't present in the same places as before. Even so, those who have followed their story know that this distance isn't enough to erase everything they've built. Silence doesn't imply forgetting. It means they're going through a different phase, but their connection remains. People who have been emotionally connected don't disconnect overnight. And Taehyung and Jungkook have shared many years of experiences that don't fade away after a few months of absence. On the contrary, they grow stronger. Because everything they've experienced has created a solid foundation that withstands even time without physical contact. This stage doesn't change what exists between them. It only puts it on hold, but it doesn't erase it. When they meet again, everything that hasn't been said with words will come out in that hug that so many Taehyung fans are waiting for. It won't be just any greeting. It will be a demonstration of everything they've kept silent. It will be a way of saying, "I'm still here, the same as before, the same as always." At that moment, there will be no need for speeches. It will be enough to see how they search for each other with their eyes and how they cling to each other, just as they always have.